And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending the Backus Plum Computer Consulting monthly webinar series today featuring Avalara. Before I jump in, just a few things. We are recording this, as you just heard, and we will be sending this recording out to everybody who registered. If you have any questions during the webinar, there's a Q&A section at the bottom of your toolbar. Go ahead and put your questions in there. We'll try to get to them all at the end. With that out of the way, it is now my pleasure to introduce to you Maria Tringali and Parker Wilson. Maria is going to kick us off. She is a senior sales consultant with Avalara. She's been with them 2014 and is focused on training, educating, and supporting customers, prospective customers, sales teams, and partners on tax compliance requirements for B2B sellers. She's passionate about improving the exempt customer experience and helping businesses improve upon and automate traditionally labor-intensive and risk-prone activities. Now, before I waste all the time we have here today, I'll let Maria take the floor.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kelly. That was kind of a mouthful, wasn't it? So thrilled to be here with Parker today and with Backus Plum. Again, I love working with you. So thanks for partnering with Avalara. As Kelly just said, I'm super sillily happy to talk about exempt sales and sales for manufacturers and distributors. When I started at Avalara in 2014, I actually was on the Sage sales team. So I worked with a lot of Sage partners and talked with a lot of Sage customers. So I know your world pretty well. Now I specialize in that. So thrilled to be here with Parker. So let's dive into it. So as Kelly said, I'm Maria and this is Parker. And Parker will be talking to us about Nexus in a couple minutes, but let's talk an overview of just kind of what the sales tax world looks like. So this is our agenda for today. I want to talk about how sales tax rates are really just the tip of the iceberg. And there's all this other compliance stuff underneath for B2B sellers that you really need to be aware of and be compliant with in your business. We'll talk a little bit about audit risk and kind of what's changing in the environment as far as audits. And then, as I said, Parker's going to talk to you about Nexus and how things have changed over the past few years and how we all need to make sure we're taking a trip to the doctor to make sure that we're registered properly. We'll talk about tax research, which is, if you're familiar with Avalara, you may not be familiar with this tool. We acquired a company a couple of years ago. We have this amazing tax research solution now, so it may be new to some of you if you've seen us chat before. Exemption certificate management, my favorite, talking about doing a better job of that, and a little bit about use tax and business licenses before we wrap up. So that's a lot to cover in 45 or so minutes, but I think we can do it, Parker. So first, let's talk about tax calculation. So I call tax calculation the sort of sexy part of sales tax. It's really the above the iceberg thing that we as consumers see. But when we're in business, the things change. So there are all these things underneath that iceberg that equal tax compliance that you and your business need to make sure you are compliant with and for, and you've done all of the things in your business to make sure that this is sustainable compliance. So you can see Nexus is there, managing your exemption certificates, managing customer service. I have that highlighted there. Use tax global. Are you selling overseas? How do we collect tax there? A lot of people are doing e-commerce B2B, e-commerce B2C. We got to cover both of those customers. Maybe we're collecting certificates on the fly. Maybe we sign up accounts. We got to have, if we have a new shopping cart and our ERP, now we got to combine those two together for filing. So there's a lot going on underneath that iceberg. And that's really what Parker and I are going to dive into today to make sure that you and your business are compliant. It's not just calculation. And I know Parker supports me on this, as almost everybody that calls into us says, hey, we're launching B2C, so we need to get those tax rates, right? And that's kind of where it stops, right, Parker? Right. And then we like to take you on kind of a little trip to the doctor, if you will, to say, well, that's great. We're absolutely, we're going to help you with the tax calculations, but we also need to make sure all these other things are in place in order for you to actually be compliant and remit properly. And that includes your exempt sales, your business licenses, your registrations. So we help you through all of this stuff. Absolutely, we do calculations, but let's talk about, and tax research. So let's talk a little bit about understanding audits. So I know it's not something that we wake up in the morning and are afraid of. We're not afraid we're going to get audited, but we all kind of know in the back of our mind that it actually can happen. So we partner with a lot of businesses like Backus Plum, a lot of CPAs, KPMG, Pricewaterhouse. We partner with everybody. And so we do a lot of research, and we know from our work and our own work, as well as the work with our partners, that the audit risk is really highest for those who have a very high percentage of buyers that want to be exempt from sales tax. So 60% of audits target these industries. The reason is it's easy. If you have a missing exemption certificate on a $10,000 order and you didn't charge tax because you're like, oh, that's the city, and you didn't charge tax, and the state says, where's the certificate? And you can't prove you had it, you out of your pocket owe that money. So auditors aren't dumb. They know that it's easy pickings to find missing exemption certificates and find tax that they didn't get. So keep in mind that your job as a seller is just to be the pass-through. So you just want to be compliant enough to be that pass-through. You don't want any of that tax to come out of your pocket. So that's what we're talking about today, is making sure that you have everything you need in place so that you collect properly and you remit properly. You're really just the go-between. But what happens in reality is if you can't prove that you had compliance processes in place, the money does have to come out of your pocket, and that gets expensive. And now I also have a lot of people tell me, and maybe I have a slide for this later on, I might, but I have a lot of people tell me that, hey, we were in an audit before and we only ended up paying, X amount of money, $10,000 or something, so it wasn't too bad. But what they forget is, number one, that 10,000 came out of your pocket. Number two, how much time did it take your staff to go through that audit and look through everything and collect certificates and look at invoices and call customers and just do all this stuff, get registered? It costs your business a lot more than just that little bit of tax you had to pay out of your pocket. So you can see there on my slide that the average cost of an audit to your business, including your staff's time, your penalties, your fees, hiring professionals, is $114,000. Nobody wants to pay this out of their pocket. Automation and making sure you're compliant is way less expensive than going through this pain. So again, while we know it's not something you wake up in the morning worrying about, it is something that can happen, and your type of business is a target. So just know that, and that's what we're talking about today. As you know, states are always desperate for tax revenue. We've heard some people say that states or jurisdictions have more money after COVID, but I was just listening to the news in Seattle this morning. Believe me, they have plans for that money, and they're still short money, right? We still can't hire police officers here. We still don't have enough attorneys. We don't have enough of anything. So states, even though you're hearing these surpluses, believe me, they have places for that money to go, and they still want their sales tax money. And one of the things I always point out, this slide says that states' gross sales tax makes up on average 48% of states' revenue. Well, I live in Washington, where we don't have state income tax. We only do federal. So ours is actually 54%. So we know as consumers that sales tax is what pays for our roads. And we know how important it is to the state because we don't have state income tax. So there's always stories on the news about a sales tax on something so that we can pay for something else. So we're very aware here of how important sales tax is. So it's your job as a consumer as a seller, to make sure you get that sales tax from the consumer to the state easily. So I do get this a lot. Parker, you probably get this as well, but most of my sales are tax exempt. So I don't charge sales tax, or I don't have a sales tax problem. When I was doing Parker's job, when I was working on the Sage team, I'd go to trade shows. Parker, you probably have this issue. I'm at the booth at a trade show or an event, or even a Sage 100 event or a Sage event, and people look at our booth and they go, oh, sales tax, we don't charge it, and they walk on, right? Does that happen to you, Parker?
Oh yeah.
You're absolutely. Like, wait, this is not just sales tax, right? So we're talking tax compliance here, all those things underneath that, that iceberg that your business really needs to make sure they're compliant. So with that, there's been some changes in Nexus. And if you don't know, well, Parker will tell you what Nexus is, but there's been some changes in this world. And if your business has not paid attention to this, I always say, if you're multitasking right now, look up and listen to Parker for a minute, because this is really important for your business to know. So I'll toss it to you for a few.
Yeah, and I think the biggest point that you just mentioned, a lot of folks that think they're exempt, Nexus doesn't apply to them. Well, we're going to share with you here shortly why that's not really the case. So just giving kind of a broad overview or the definition of Nexus, it's the connection between a seller and a state that requires the seller to then register, collect, and remit sales tax in the state And then you also see in parentheses there, or prove why you don't, right? And so we'll get into that with exemption certificates. What we've also seen too is a lot of folks with the South Dakota versus Wayfair court case ruling, they don't think this applies to them. And so we have a slide that's going to clearly show mainly to the Sage seller or the Sage customer, right, that you need to also look at exempt sales. And so economic nexus was the South Dakota versus Wayfair court case ruling, which basically put in place that now every single state, there were a couple of stragglers, but now as of recently, every single state now has some sort of threshold in place that aligns with South Dakota versus Wayfair, where you as a business owner or as a seller, whether it's taxable or tax exempt or your customers exempt, you would need to follow the rules and laws of these particular states, and you potentially do have a nexus obligation in these states.
Right. And so just a quick summary on that. So if you don't know what South Dakota versus Wayfair was, it was a state said, hey, there's not physical businesses in my state where people are going to the store, but instead they're buying things. Parker's buying things from Amazon or buying things from out of state and having it shipped into North Carolina where he lives. And so North Carolina wants a cut of that tax. So it's not just for internet sales, it's for anything. So whether if you're a manufacturer and you're shipping things across state lines, that counts. So as soon as South Dakota won that case, all the rest of the states within like a year all implemented laws. And so that's what he's talking about. So it does apply. It's not just internet laws. It applies if you're just sending something across state lines, no matter how you go to market.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, the wholesale sales, sales for resale, it doesn't necessarily matter whether you're utilizing the internet or phone sales. That's a great point. This also shows what some of or how each state kind of has a different economic nexus threshold. So you can kind of go down the line. Unfortunately, every state isn't the same. It's kind of why we're in business as well. It's to track and keep up with all of these rules and laws. It can be a very large burden for you as a business. So on the right-hand side, you can kind of see that North Dakota, they're looking at $100,000 in gross taxable sales. Kansas is looking at all remote sales. California and Texas, $500,000. They're generally the larger ones. And then there's some in the middle that are looking like Connecticut, $250,000 in sales. And some of these have already changed, right? I think Connecticut's one of them where they've already gone down to the $100,000. Georgia, $100,000 in sales or 200 retail sales. And then Alabama and Mississippi, both are $250,000 in sales. And as you can see there in parentheses, exempt sales are included. And so
you want to look at the next slide, Parker?
Yeah, the next slide, you know it. So this next slide, like Maria was speaking to, even though you're selling remote, or even if you're not actually going into that particular state, but you still sell a high dollar of maybe pallets that you manufacture a specific product and you're selling it for wholesale, or someone's reselling your product, all of these states in orange, they're potentially looking at all of those sales in addition to sales that are deemed or known as taxable, or that are to the end consumer, either online or not. So it puts it in perspective that not you as a wholesaler or you as a reseller or retailer potentially do have an obligation in a lot of these states if you're selling high dollar or even a specific threshold, right? So those are things that you need to keep in mind. Like Maria said, maybe a checkup at the doctor might not be a bad thing for you to potentially look into this a little bit deeper, or to have Avalara potentially do some research around kind of understanding and knowing whether you have an obligation in a particular state or not. Because as a business, I know I talk to them a lot. This is something that you're not thinking about daily, right? Sales tax is not something that's high on your priority list, but unfortunately, it can get put on your desk very quickly if you're doing it incorrectly.
Right, and these states talk, right? Back to my audit conversation. If Nebraska or Iowa finds you, believing the South Dakota guy is going to find you. They once a chain sort of starts, and so you want to be proactive rather than reactive to that.
Yeah, and so kind of going back to the theme of the PowerPoint, right? But most of or all of my sales are exempt. Do I really have to register in the state? For full compliance purposes, the answer actually is yes. You do potentially need to file and remit a $0 return if all of your sales are exempt in the state. Most states still want you to register. They still want to know about you. They still want you to file a potential $0 return. And what probably will end up happening is some of these folks are not going to give you an exemption certificate. So what does that mean, Maria? You need to be charging sales tax to these folks. And so knowing where you need or have an obligation is going to be paramount and very important for business health overall. And so we have some services that we can assist you with as far as understanding that. And one of those we're going to talk about here shortly.
Yep. And I always like to just kind of highlight that these are laws that the state passed. I know Parker already said that, but I like to say that again, because they are laws that the state passed. And it's your job as a business to make sure that you have, that you're compliant with each state's laws. And so if you have to file a $0 return, that's okay. You file it once a year. It's not really that big of a deal. I'm not really sure why businesses are really still stressed about that. So you have to report in. It's not any worse than anything else. You just have to report your income, and we have all our certificates, and boom, we're good. So it's not the end of the world if you really are fully exempt. But as Parker said, we can help you figure all this stuff out. So tax research, I think that's back to me, right? Or is that you? Is that me?
Yeah, so I'm going to take this one as well.
Oh, good.
So
you go for it.
So the research tool is something that Maria was mentioning before. We purchased a company called Transactional Tax Resource, and we added them to the plethora of content and data and detail that we have on our side, and it just enhanced our tool, right? And so you can see here, there's kind of the why, right? And I want you to think about that as kind of the detail around knowing that you have an expert, knowing that the information is correct, thinking about the changing of the laws and how all of that kind of goes into the what, right? And the what is really the tax calculation engine itself, right? And some of the other features or tools that we have. But it's really important to get the why right on the very front end. Think of maybe your tax strategy, how products are taxed or not taxed. Those are the type of things that are the why on the front end of then the what, or the automation around the tax calculations, or the, hey, should I be registered in particular states? Am I charging the right amount of tax, or should I even be charging tax on certain items or to certain customers, right?
Or drop shipping.
Yep.
All the drop shipping rules.
Do I need an exemption certificate? Do I need to charge tax to my vendor, or does my vendor need to charge tax to me? So there's all these complications that come into play when doing business in particular states. And so knowing and keeping up with the why is also a very important piece of the full compliance burden that unfortunately is put on you as a business. And we have a module or a research tool that you can utilize to do all of this on the front end and ongoing as you're doing business in particular states. And then you can utilize the what, or the calculation engine, or our exemption certificate management tool to then do the what, right? The actual execution of the computations that are needed.
So true. Yeah, the invoice comes at the end, right? That after everything Parker just said, once everything's in place and you've made the sale, then you do the final calculation. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to happen. And one other thing I don't think you mentioned, Parker, is when you're grouping things together, when you're doing, say, installation plus warranty plus parts, this tool gives you the ability to look that package type stuff up and how I should actually apply tax. Or if you do large bids, if you do bids and you're competing against other bids, and you need to make sure you include the right amount of tax in that bid, this will give you that information. So it's the way before you get to invoice information. It's fantastic. We use it. I'm sure you do too, Parker. I use it every day. I'm pulling it up, looking something up for a customer. It's just, I don't know how we didn't have it at our fingertips before,
right.
Really. It's
Absolutely. Amazing. Yeah, and I'm right in line with that, right? Looking things up, utilizing Google or the Department of revenue websites at particular states. I'm sure we've all looked through those before. You're generally not going to get the information you're looking for. And if you go back or email someone at the Department of Revenue, you may get a different answer the next time. I know I have when I've sent some detail to them. So knowing that you're getting the right answer the first time, because it's backed by the state statutes, right? We reference the state statutes within the research tool itself. You also have the ability to gain access to an expert here on our side. So not only is it just a research tool and kind of providing the data and detail that you need, but it's also kind of that checkpoint, right? So shows kind of around what businesses are doing now. Obviously you have your CPA or you're leveraging those folks. A lot of these folks, they have some sort of tool like that too. So instead of leaning on them or potentially needing them to get answers for you, you can potentially have it already at your fingertips, like Maria was mentioning, and it's not something that you have to go searching for. You know where you can get the answers for potential sales tax questions, and you know that they're going to be right. And that's really one of the most important things that businesses have told us why they love the tool so much is they have it at their fingertips. They can get the right answer the first time. They don't need to go searching different places looking for specific answers, and it's all in one place.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet tool.
And this is kind of just hammers home that there's a lot of laws and statutes out there, and so getting it translated into plain English, that's a difficult thing, and that's exactly what this tool does. So it takes that mundane task of looking at tax law and, hey, what is the exact answer here, right? And so it does that along the lines of, is this product taxable, right? And you can go more granular. You can look at the actual statutes themselves. It all has all of that reference there. But what most folks want to know is, hey, is this product taxable or not? And it gives you a yes or no definitive answer, or taxable, exempt, or non-taxable answer. So giving you kind of the straight answer that you were looking for, that's sometimes hard to find, especially when you're emailing a CPA or you want a detail from a CPA. Sometimes they're going to give you kind of a wishy-washy answer because they don't want to be wrong, right? And it's all referenced to a specific statute. And if you do have additional questions, like I was mentioning before, you can actually send a note to either via email or within the tool to an actual tax expert, and they can give more clarity on a specific answer.
Yep. And if you're a drop shipper, I really love the drop shipping matrix, where you literally just put in where's the manufacturer, where's the seller, where's the customer, who has nexus and what's it. It's this great little wizard, and it tells you who's on the hook for the tax according to that state's laws. So we get a lot of, you probably do too, Parker, we get a lot of questions about drop shipping in our business, and Avatax can calculate tax, but it has to know who needs to pay first, right? So this platform really helps you understand that better for your business. So.
Yeah, that's kind of like the aha moment when I show that to a customer, and it's their scenario. That's kind of the most important part, right? I'm not making up some scenario. It's they're giving me the details and the answers, and then it spits out exactly how it should be handled. So that's a great point.
Yeah, I love that thing.
One of the other pieces or parts of compliance, right, is the overall challenge around managing exempt sales or managing exempt documents. Right. And again, we go back to the economic nexus challenge, right? And I think we're gonna show a specific customer here and how things changed based on the South Dakota versus Wayfair court case ruling. But here we have a seller. How are we going to collect all these new certificates, right? And the buyer says, but I've been buying from you for years without providing a certificate or paying tax, right? We probably all dealt with this scenario before. It's, hey, this is how we've been doing business with you for so long, and we've never had to provide an exemption certificate to you. So you have to tiptoe a fine line, but at the same time, you need to be compliant, because if a state comes looking for these are the low-hanging fruit, right? Is not having that exemption certificate present, not having that on file, and you can utilize the state's changes in the laws to your advantage of saying, hey, listen, things have changed with these state statutes, but in all reality, not much has changed, and you probably should have been collecting these for years as well.
Yeah, I usually recommend, and we talk about customer experience. I usually recommend it to our customers now, Parker, after all these years. Let's just collect them everywhere. If you're selling to manufacturers or selling to resellers, just collect them everywhere. It's not the law if you're not registered, but it's just so much easier than having to drop what you're doing once you have to register and go ask everybody for a certificate. But let's talk about what that experience
Yeah, and I
is for
think
that customer.
this is the biggest thing is leveraging it or outsourcing it to someone like Avalara or to us. Really what we've seen is such a high increase in customer satisfaction, right? It's giving the customer a much better experience. Instead of you saying, hey, can you provide me with this exemption certificate? The customer doesn't know. They have to go look for it. They have to find it. They have to go to the Department of Revenue website. Leveraging an automated tool like we have, it will give them the certificate right there. It'll be attached, or even giving them the ability to go through a web wizard. And so now that and you can all read, but the customer feels like the burden, you're asking them for the documentation, right? That's a difficult thing for them now to do, is provide that. But if you provide it to them, or you give that to them, then there's no delays. You can place the order much faster. There's no credit or rebills that need to happen. So like it says there in orange on the left, managing exemption certificates right is managing customers well, right? And I think that says it the best, is having the ability for your customer to fill these certificates out in an automated way, as well as giving it to them instead of asking it for them. You're going to find that the customer satisfaction is going to go through the roof, and your customers are going to be much happier. And you, as either the customer representative or your customer success team or whatever you may call yourselves, your job is going to be much easier as well.
Totally agree.
And so this is kind of the theme, right? The burden of proof is on you. So you are the ones that have to show documentation to the state on why your customer is exempt, right? It's not on your customer. So you actually have to collect this detail from your customer as far as ensuring that you do not need to be charging them sales tax. The liability, unfortunately, would fall on you if the state were to come knocking and say, hey, why did you not charge sales tax to this particular customer? It's not on that customer to get you the documentation. It's on you to go get the documentation from the customer.
Yeah, I want to add there too. I get this question probably every day. Well, can't I just get the tax ID number? So I can't answer for every auditor on the planet, but I can tell you that the law says you have to have the actual document, and those documents have information on them, meaning who am I buying this from? What am I buying? What am I in the business for? So there's detail about that sale, not just a tax ID number. So the answer to the question is no. In general, just a tax ID number is not going to be the end all be all. I'm sure it will help. I'm not an auditor. I'm sure it will help in an audit situation. But if you want to be compliant, you do need that specific document for specific purchase reason and prove you had it on the date of that purchase. So, and I think this was the example you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, this is the example of kind of how things have potentially changed from the South Dakota versus Wayfair court case and the impact for a manufacturer in New York, right? So 99% of their sales are to other OEMs or reseller dealers, so no tax needed there. The Wayfair ruling increased their burden to prove exemption certificates. So previously they only had 75 on file, but now they're needing to register in a much more states. So now much more ship to locations based on these customers. And so now they need over 1,100 new documents. And so this potentially shows you that doing that checkup, understanding where you have an obligation is paramount and really important for you as a business, because maybe you have a lapse in compliance and are not collecting all of your certificates. Maybe you need more than 1,000 potential certificates as well. And then on the right-hand side, we have a national wholesaler, and they sell to resellers who then kind of sell to the end user, right? A lot of drop shipments, that's part of their business model. Wayfair grew their nexus from just the physical headquarters in New York to almost all of the US states that charge sales tax. And so previously they only had 500 in the state of New York. Now we're talking over 5,000 documents they need to collect nationwide. And so the burden is either put on the AP or the AR or customer service, or sometimes even the sales folks, right? You don't want these sales folks collecting exemption certificate data coming from a salesperson. You don't want them dealing with that, right? So having an automated tool to potentially manage and do this, and we can even take it a step further. We actually have a managed services team that can get this off your plate completely, and you can let the experts handle and manage these collections and maintainings of these documents. This slide here kind of just shows you that there are a lot of different channels that you potentially have your sales through. And so keeping track of the exemption certificate process can happen at multiple different places or levels. We see a lot of folks now moving to e-commerce. And so this is the folks that want to buy immediately. We even see that vendors go on your site and potentially want to buy tax exempt. Well, kind of going in line with this conversation we've had so far, they have to prove that they're exempt. So having some way that they can provide documentation on your website, again, may increase that customer satisfaction. You may potentially win the bid. You may be the company that allows them to do this. And so they're going to come to you from now on if you have the ability for them to fill that certificate out right there online, and they can make the purchase tax exempt right there at your website. So thinking about things like that, staying in front of, as far as the technology, that is something that we've seen a lot of folks have leveraged our tool to do that, and they've gained more business, they've increased their revenue. And obviously some folks even have a specific portal that they can leverage for their vendors, giving that same technology now to your customer portal where they're signing up as a new customer. You can give them the ability to give that certificate to you as well as they sign up. And then we have kind of the one-offs in the store or in the shopping cart where maybe they don't buy exempt from you all the time, but for this particular purchase, they are exempt. So giving them the ability to do that. And then when you're setting up a customer, right, we see a lot of folks are now changing their processes around not only getting a 1099 and all the other documents or details, a credit check, also including now getting that exemption certificate up front from them. So now you don't have to worry about any credits, any rebills. You don't have to worry about dealing with that later. You can deal with that proactively up front, get that certificate from them. And then even giving your sales folks the ability to do this in the field, right? How awesome would that be? Is they get that certificate right there. Not only do they know what certificate needs to be filled out, but they can have the customer fill it out through a web wizard or a web portal, and there doesn't need to be any paper exchanging hands. There doesn't need to be any type of paper documentation. It'll all potentially be in the cloud automatically, or magically, as we like to say, Maria.
Exactly. Document management systems, one of my favorite.
So the evaluating your current system and your current process, again, doing that doctor checkup, right? Do I have a system to do this already? If not, feel free to reach out to Raucus Bloom. They'll get you in contact with someone like myself. We can go through ways that we can improve your current process. We can improve your customer satisfaction. We can make sure that your documents are valid and up to date. And then now you're going to have the ability to be able to run reports on them, to track the data, because that's one of the most important pieces, right? Having the documentation or having that piece of paper on file is one thing. Being able to run reports on the documentation, being able to run reports on the data, and then now knowing and being confident that the detail that you have on file is up to date, that is one of the most important things that folks like to use our tool to do, is to keep that peace of mind, right? Help them sleep at night.
Yep. And a document management system is really only capturing an image. You might be able to track one piece of data like an expiration date, but when you look at our new world of having nexus in multiple states, each of your customers, if they are buying or having items shipped to multiple states, they have to have different certificates on file with you. So document management becomes pretty antiquated pretty quickly when you talk about compliance. It's really just an image. I love this comment, Parker. You probably get it every day that people go, oh, we have them all digitally. They're scanned in as a PDF. That's not digital. That's a picture. That's not digital data. It's literally just a picture. It's not electronic data. This is a completely different thing. So document management is not the way to manage compliance anymore. It's really just managing some images and a quantity, and you can't really even search very well for information for a sale date. So we need to think about that, because that's usually what we get is, oh, we already have doc management, we're doing something. Well, of course you're doing something in your business. I hope you're doing something, but this is a much better way to do it. So, all right, use tax. So, one of my least favorite subjects. So use tax is tough. We also get this question a lot. Like, we don't charge a lot of sales tax, or not worried about our tax calculation, but where our audits are challenging, or where our returns or sales tax filings are challenging, is in use tax. So Avalara has a few ways that can help you with use tax, but let's talk for a minute why it's hard. So use tax is something that you have to remit after the purchase. So it's very difficult because it is subjective. We're calculating tax on an invoice. We've got items on an invoice. We calculate the tax, we sell the order, right? Use tax means I bought stuff and I either bought it using my own exemption certificate because I'm going to resell it, or I bought it and the seller didn't charge me the right amount of tax or didn't charge me tax. And so I have to go and audit this afterwards. So it's what's owed by the buyer when the tax charged by the seller didn't cover your liability. So it's very subjective. So it's not fun. Nobody likes it. And a lot of people just kind of estimate. They're like, we're just gonna put this number in. So that's another place. I didn't really talk about this in the beginning when I talked about audits, but use tax is another place that auditors love to go when you are a seller that has mostly exempt buyers, because they know you're likely to also have use tax, especially if you do installations or things that become real property. Then you really have to worry about that, taking those cabinets out of inventory and installing them. Then I got to remit use tax, or I buy all these things, some of the things I use in the job, some of the things I use in the shop. You have to account for use tax, and it's a difficult thing. So automation can really help you with that. There's all kinds of different rules, just like sales tax. It's also compounded because every state has its own rules. There's consumer use tax, there's seller's use tax, there's different forms for each state, there's different ways that they calculate it. So automation, or at least understanding it better, and this is also where that tax research tool comes in that Parker talked about. There's a lot of information on sales tax and use tax in that tool to help you understand your business and how you should be remitting use tax. So companies typically manage their, as I kind of already mentioned, their use tax liability by, I don't know, guessing, estimating, a lot of manual process on Excel spreadsheets, a lot of asking people out in the field, hey, how many hammers did we use on that job? There's a lot of stuff going on. So there's different ways that automation can help you get this in line and make that part of reporting into the state much easier, and also getting more compliant. What we find when we work with customers is most people end up saving money when they automate the use tax process, or when they improve their process. Typically, people are overpaying or over remitting just because they don't want to be under. And there's also cases where we've had software companies where they buy supplies at their corporate headquarters, and the tax rate is different at their corporate headquarters than where they ship those items out. So say they ship a laptop out to Parker in North Carolina, which has a lower tax rate than California, which is where maybe the laptop was purchased. So, and when you get a handle on use tax, you're actually going to reduce, most businesses will significantly reduce their liability to the state. So back to our sort of trip to the doctor, it's important that you take a look at this, your use tax liability, as well as your sales tax that you're collecting from your customers when you're evaluating your tax compliance strategy. So it's really important, and that's something that good partners can help you with. So again, why do you want to automate use tax compliance? You're going to reduce your expenses, you're going to increase your cash flow, You will get control of that instead of just guessing. And you're going to, of course, spend less time on trying to figure this stuff out manually and making decisions and making guesses. And there's potential to integrate with systems as well. Depending on what systems you use, you can also integrate with some of the systems and actually make, if you have a purchasing system that you use, you can integrate a compliance tool with your purchasing system that will help you improve the use tax liability and the calculation of it. So things to think about, right? So then lastly, before we turn to questions, I just want to cover business licenses really quickly. So Avalara also has an application that you may not be familiar with that now manages business licenses. So business licenses might be from your sales tax registration form to your reseller's permit that you have for your business, to business licenses that you need for physical locations, to permits that you need to get when you do installations or projects or go out and work with a customer, to your professionals that are perhaps truck drivers, or they might be trained technicians of some sort, of plumber or installation. So there's all sorts of licenses that a business also uses. And Avalara now has this great software application. I just love it. It's a fantastic software application that was created from the ground up to manage licenses, kind of like the tax research tool that Parker mentioned. It helps you go get it. So one of the reasons why acquiring business license is difficult is what Parker mentioned earlier, is I don't even know where to go. Do I need a county license? Do I need a city license? Is this a state license? Where do I go? What does it cost? How do I apply for it? I've got guys out in the field that need permits. I've got people back in corporate that don't know what they need out in the field. So this tool helps you with those challenges. It directs you towards what industry you're in, what licenses you might need there, and where to go get it. And you can actually even pull in the form and fill it out in PDF form within the application, submit it out to the organization. When you get that license back, you pull it into the system and you calendar it. Does it need to be renewed quarterly? Does it need to be renewed annually? Next time you have a job in that same location, anybody can go see, hey, we already have the construction permit there, or we already have our whatever license we need there. So it takes these difficult things out, reduces the significant time that you spend on getting businesses. So knowing which license to get for your business, knowing where to go get it, knowing if your business is compliant. You can check an address, you can check an industry and see if I have everything that I should have at that location. And then of course, keeping track of those expirations and renewals. It's a really, really sweet tool. So if you are in the business of where you have a lot of physical locations, or you need a lot of licenses or permits for the work you do, definitely chat with Brackus Plum about this, and they'll connect you with an Avalara rep like Parker, who can talk to you more about improving the management of your business licenses. So Parker, do you want to run through, we've kind of talked about all this, but maybe quickly run through what our solution would look like kind of from A to Z?
Certainly. Yeah, and I think to Maria's point too is just talking through some of the best practices, right? And what we've seen and how we've helped a lot of customers. Maybe not every single product would be right for you, but maybe one or two of them potentially could. On the very forefront and beginning of the process, most folks come to us and say, hey, well, where do we start? What should we do? So obviously we suggest that you connect or contact your sales and local tax expert. If you don't have one, we partner with a lot of them, as well as we have some internally at Avalara, former CPAs or current CPAs, former tax attorneys, things of that nature internally. And generally what they're going to suggest is you conduct or do some type of sales tax risk assessment or nexus study. Really determining where you have the obligation or where you need to register. And then also looking at considering automating, right? Automating what number of different things we can automate, but mainly either the calculations, the collection of those certificates, as well as the filing and remittance of your sales tax returns. And so we'll talk through a few of those. Up first, we have the research tool, and it's going to show you a little bit about kind of what all goes into that. The research tool is kind of this large overarching solution, and there's a lot that goes into it. But the best part about it is there's never enough, right? And I've been here for almost 10 years now, and I'm still learning stuff about sales tax. And so having this powerful tool at your fingertips to be able to look up any and everything to do with the sales and use tax space is going to be a great tool for potentially you to use, your team to use. And that way, you kind of have that peace of mind that we're doing it right. That's really going to be kind of one of the most important pieces. Here we kind of have the full compliance suite. We start with the research tool, right? Again, it's kind of that what behind the why, or excuse me, the why behind the what. Mixing them up here, sorry. The why behind the what. And so it's kind of that extensive database that's going to provide all the detail around the research, the compliance, ensuring that you're staying up to date with all of that. Next, we have the management of those exemption certificates, right? Especially in the Sage space, a lot of you are wholesalers or manufacturers or distributors. And so the sales tax piece is really not as important because you're not needing to collect sales tax. But what you are needing to potentially collect is those pesky exemption certificates. So staying up and in front of those, managing them, maintaining them, having some way to run reports on when they expire, and staying proactive with gathering and getting them. Automation is going to help you make your life easier, right? And that's generally what we're here to do.
Yeah, you want to move them. I just want to add to that. You want to move them out of your ERP, and this is kind of a paradigm shift for most people. You want to move those out of your ERP and into your tax determination engine. When you mark someone exempt or not exempt in your ERP, it generally just exempts them everywhere. So now with this multi-state nexus issue that we all have, we have to make sure that you've got a certificate in place for that ship to address for that state, and your ERP can't manage that. So that's why it is a significant part of the automation solution. So when we get to tax determination.
Yeah, and I think it's not an extra field in your ERP system that you have to customize, right? And then you have to keep track of that. You have to manage that. Staying away from that is going to make your life a lot easier. And then the tax determination engine, you might think, well, hey, maybe we don't even need that. But when it comes to the actual filing of the returns, getting all of that data into our engine or into the admin console to then be able to give you reports for you to use to do the sales tax filings, or for Avalara to take that off of your plate, we still need the direct connection, and you still need the ability for us to then know, hey, is there an exemption certificate on file here? Let's check. Oh, the system does all the checking for you. Yes, there is one on file. Don't apply tax to that invoice, right? And then now we also have all the detail to be able to start the submission and filing of your sales tax returns. And so as you can see here, this is kind of the full compliance suite. You might have seen this slide before. We've added the research tool on the front end for the why behind the what, right? So I think this is a great slide to kind of show you what all is encompassing and including. And then we have a couple following slides just to talk a little bit more about the management of those exemption certificates. I mean, I don't think we can talk about this enough, right, Maria? The collection, the maintaining, the storing, the reporting on, being able to run analysis, and then starting it all over again, right? That certificate is now expiring. We know some states don't expire, like Texas. So we still provide detail and suggestions around, hey, you still probably should get a new one every 3 to 4 years, because if they change the name of their business, if they change the address, if the person that signed it is no longer at the company, all of those things can potentially make that certificate invalid. And it's like you never had one. So if an auditor were to come about, generally they're pretty nice. They allow you to get a new one. But who wants to then have this process where you're like a chicken with your head cut off, having to run around, get all brand new certificates at the time of a potential audit? And again, most folks think, oh yeah, it was only a couple $1,000s that we owed. But they don't think about how much time did it take? Who spent the time? What could they have been doing instead of dealing with an audit? So those are the things you need to think about and deal with. This goes back to
this. Yeah, we talked about
this. This goes back to kind of the conversation we had, giving you that competitive differentiation, right? Being able to have that certificate collected right there at the shopping cart level, built into your shopping cart experience, right? Instead of them having to leave the shopping cart, look on the Department of Revenue website, oh, I got to fill out the 595E, whatever it may be. So that gives them the ability for you to differentiate yourselves from your competitors and give you a leg up at that checkout portal, as well as if you have some sort of place or portal that you want your vendors or you as the vendor give your folks the ability that are buying for wholesale or resale or whatever have you.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet technology.
And then going back to kind of maybe the smaller portion or piece, but knowing when you do need to charge sales tax, that it's done accurately, correct. We have all the detail around address validation, the sourcing rules, ensuring that the right jurisdiction is assigned, and then now having all that detail, again, that we can then do the filings for. And then like Maria was talking about, the use tax tool, giving you the ability to be able to sift through what vendors are charging you the wrong amount, right? We know you know what vendors charge you the wrong amount of tax. This just gives you the ability to now go back to them and say, hey, we have a tool that that knows what we should have been charged. And so here's our bill back as far as what you should have charged us, or hey, we want you to rebill us the right amount, saving you money, making sure that now you're doing this correctly and right. As well as it gives you the ability, the vendors that you know are charging the right amount, you can get those in and through and just worry about the vendors that are not charging the right amount, or worried about ones that are a certain dollar value that you can look at more deeply. And then around the actual filings of these sales tax returns, giving you now an easy, repeatable process where we provide you with the liability worksheet. You look that over against your general ledger, you do your reconciliation, ensure the information is correct and right. Then we take it from there. We start the submission and filing of that return, as well as we handle the treasury and remittance. So potentially only having to ACH one amount or cut one check. I don't know who cuts checks anymore, but in ACH to Avalara, we handle all of the jurisdictional payouts. So we'll cut the checks, we'll do the ACHs, we'll even go on your online site and handle the filing and remittance there as well. So we're doing all of that, getting that entire process off your plate. And this is what a lot of folks see the value add or time savings in the filing component.
Yeah.
With Avalara them outsourcing that to Avalara.
And the system does it itself. I think that a lot of people will say, oh, don't worry, we know how to do our returns already. Well, kind of like certificates. Well, of course you do. You're in business, you're filing these. But the software actually completes the forms for you. So there's no more pulling reports from e-commerce and your ERP and whatever system, because as Parker said earlier, it's all already in the system. We connect to everything where you create an invoice. And so we have all the data. So people don't even touch it anymore. The software literally fills out the forms. You tell us what date, what form you need to file, what state you're registered in, what form, and what the frequency is, and the software fills it out. So all you have to do is that reconciliation. So it saves you a considerable amount of time, as well as it's 100% accurate, because everything that you sold flows through to us. So unless you did something manual that didn't go in your system, we're going to have all of your data there. So it's a different, again, a little bit of a paradigm shift, different than what people think of, say, your CPA doing your returns, right? And taking the reports and filling out forms. The software does it for you, which is really unique in the industry. And then licenses, and I think we're wrapping up, right, Parker?
Yeah, last but not least, the management of those licenses and permits. Like Maria was saying, if this is you and you do need assistance with this, we're happy to show this tool. I mean, it's a great, robust tool to manage this in the cloud, right? Who would have thought that you could manage those licenses and permits in the cloud? Well, we've solved that for you, and we're happy to take that off your plate. We know this is something that you probably already have a vendor. The real question is, are you happy with that, or are you happy with that vendor, right?
Yeah.
Or not? So we're happy to be that vendor for you and manage that process for you.
I love this platform. I already said that. It's so cool. I love demoing it and I love using it. It makes your life so much easier. All right, so let's wrap up. I think we might have a couple minutes for questions, Parker. So I think we've gone through this kind of ad nauseum, but why do you want to automate? Accuracy, efficiency, satisfaction, risk management, and managing your growth. And even if you're selling your business, managing the potential sale or acquisitions, your compliance has to be in order, and automation really helps that. So this is my little, omni-channel, sorry, one more slide. Omni-channel, Parker did talk about this a little bit, but when you are, and I know most of you are doing B2C or B2B online, as well as your traditional sales channels now, you have to think about compliance about all channels, and are you, across all channels, and are you compliant across all channels? Are we registered where we need to be? Do we have the tax rates? Do we have the exemption certificates? Do we have good processes in place? So you need to think about that underneath the iceberg and make sure you're compliant across all channels. I get a lot of calls, as you probably do, Parker, from people who are the marketing people, and they just want the tax rates in their e-commerce shopping cart. That's not compliance, right? That's not compliance. That's like that's even a smaller piece than the tip of my iceberg, right? It's like a piece of the iceberg on top. We need to think about this as a business as a whole. So again, kind of talking about this, we need to collect across all channels. We need to turn our paper into pixels. We got to get out of the paper business, guys. No more paper returns, no more paper exemption certificates, and we've got to remove the guesswork and make sure that our business stays compliant. And I'll leave you with this. This is a little kind of cheat sheet that I created a while ago. I do a lot of these webinars, work with a lot of customers. And this is just a good piece that you can print out, stick on the wall of your conference room or your virtual conference room nowadays, and walk through it. Is what we're doing now really sustainable, or do we need help? And these questions really help you kind of walk through that and brainstorm them with the group. Where are we spending our time? What are menial tasks? Where could automation help us? And Ruckus Bloom can obviously work with you on this, and contact us when necessary to talk through what pieces and parts, as Parker said, might be helpful for your business. So with that, Kelly, do we have any questions?
One question I answered so far. Everybody will be receiving a copy of this webinar. So that's good. Looking for the recording. How about, should I just have a database for certificates I can reference, or should I link them to each transaction?
Parker, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. So the specific transaction, so this is kind of a sales tax question, right? And kind of giving sales tax advice, but the actual invoice itself could be non-taxable based on who you're selling to. What we generally suggest is you're going to want a certificate for your customers that are exempt, but within that question, and I know this is, I'm kind of trying to dodge this, but I'm really not, the actual transaction itself could be taxable, right? So a lot of it is dependent upon how the transaction is handled, the customer, who you're selling to. So there can all be different factors on if and when a specific order or invoice is or is not taxable. So a lot of it depends on that specific invoice or order, as well as that specific customer. So long-winded answer there. Shorter answer would be, we would suggest that no, not an actual exemption certificate for every transaction, but for every customer that is exempt.
By state.
By state.
By
Correct.
state, yeah, you do have to have different certificates for each state, because remember that each state can audit you separately. And again, that's that problem with marking people blanket exempt in your ERP, because it'll just mark them all exempt. Anything else, Kelly?
All right, here, there are some states that include an expiration date on their certificates. Do we need to make sure that we have not expired certificates from customers for those states, or is it okay if we just get one every few years?
So about 20% of certificates actually expire. So Parker mentioned that Texas doesn't happen to expire. Neither does California. I don't know if I trust California on that one, but Illinois, they expire. Florida expires every year. Oklahoma's expire. So they do expire. So just like anything else, just like your business licenses, you need to have a process in place to get those renewed, because if they are expired, they will not pass audit, and you didn't collect the tax on an order and you had an expired certificate. Guess what? The auditor is you owe that money out of your pocket. So you definitely need to have a process in place for expirations. And here's the funny thing is, how do you know what every state's expiration rules are? So that tax research tool can really help you with that. And our exemption certificate platform, CertCapture, also knows those expirations, and our team knows them, and they can apply those as well. So it's super important that you keep up to date. I know, I can tell you this from personal experience. I worked at a company where all of our customers were universities and healthcare organizations, and I swear we never updated those certificates. I'm sure they're all expired. And so you just do that, right? You collect one, you're a salesperson, Parker, you collect one when you bring the customer on board, and then you sort of never worry about it again. So the answer is yes, you do have to watch those expiration dates.
All right, I think that's all the questions, and we're at exactly 1 hour. So great
Look at
job,
that,
guys. Well, before we sign off though, guys, thanks so much, Maria, Parker, and all the guys in the background, Cameron, Eric, who made this possible. Appreciate you guys, and thank you to all of the attendees today. We know we put these on for you guys, and we're so happy when you spend your time with us. If you need more information or you need CPE credit on this webinar, let me know. There will be a survey that goes out, and that information is right on there, so fill that out. And other than that, until next month, from the VBCC team and the Avalara folks, thanks again. Have a great afternoon.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Thanks,
Kelly.
everyone.
Thank you. Have a
Thanks,
great-
Kelly.
Bye.
Thanks, Kelly.